I'm going to show you a new tool which makes managing Cilium network policies a hell of a lot easier. It's something that's been asked for by our customers. It's been asked by ourselves internally here at Isovalent, and we're ready to share this with you as part of Isovalent Networking for Kubernetes 1.18 release going forward. You can get this from our documentation pages, or if you're early to that, you can get in touch with our support team and they'll help you get enabled with this as well. But what is it exactly that I'm going to be showing you? So let's have a quick look. And how about a policy tool which goes off, looks at all of the flows inside of your environment and the active network policies, and then starts to provide you tuning recommendations for you to improve your security posture. So I'm already going to jump through a quick forward preview of what we're going to show in this demo today. But just look at this right now. Very, very quickly, I ran that command as I'm speaking, and we can see in my default namespace, I've got one policy enabled at the moment, which allows us DNS visibility. It actually allows me to make the request from my workload running inside of that namespace to the Kube DNS services. And at the moment inside of my policy, we can see that we do not have a protocol set, so we can communicate on protocol UDP or TCP. However, all of the available flows tell me, if I look through them manually, that we're only using UDP traffic. And also as well, I have no endpoint selector available inside of that policy. It's quite a wide scope. If there's any new workloads created, maybe not by myself, maybe nefariously by bad actor, for example, this existing policy would also apply to them as well, which maybe is not something I want if I'm thinking about implementing a zero trust model inside of my environment. So again, here, this tool straight away is telling me, hey, Dean, why don't we set these additional labels inside the endpoint selector so that we can ensure that we're only targeting the workloads that are running inside of our namespace at the moment, and that nothing else is going to be accidentally picked up. And that's really, really powerful. That's fantastic. We could add this into a GitOps type situation. So if you've got GitOps type methodology and tooling in place inside of your departments, we could add this to reduce the burden on your network security teams to validate and check everything inside of the environment. We can also use this to harden our platforms going forward. So let's start by going through my environment, and then we're going to show you the Isopolicy tool now in more detail so you can see all of its features. So inside of my environment, I have just one single pod running today. We're actually using the live examples from one of our latest blog posts, which is how to safely manage Cilium network policies inside of your environment and use simulation tools like this Isopolicy tool I'm taking you through today. I'm going to drop the link down in a corner for you with a little bit of QR code as well, so you can go straight to that blog post. Some really fantastic tips there for you to help get to grips with using Cilium network policies. So inside of my environment, I have my running pod. I've also, if I spell kubectl right, I've got one network policy at the moment. So if I just go YAML, and we can see all that network policy does is captures all traffic from any endpoint inside of where it's deployed. So it's deployed inside of the default namespace, and it's looking for traffic to match going to the internal Kube DNS inside of my system at the moment, and it pattern match any type of DNS request. This also means that my workload at the moment has no ability to talk to the outside world because it's going to be denied by default, because all the traffic is allowed is that DNS request traffic itself. So at the moment, if I try to go to cisco.com, and I'm just going to add a quick timeout on the end there as well, just to make this a little bit faster for today's demo, we're going to see that fails, and that's to be expected. So what we're going to do is I'm going to now use the Isopolicy tooling. I'm going to have a quick look at those options and arguments that are available. So we can see here, the Isopolicy tooling provides Cilium network policy suggestions and simulations inside of your environment. We've got a couple of different options there, so we can lint, so we can report on issues for any deployed Cilium network policy inside of your cluster today. We can observe, we can create a snapshot to disk so we can use this tooling elsewhere if needed, or maybe we save this part of our GitOps environment as well as part of those runs and checks so they can be looked back in the future. We're going to be looking at the simulate and the tune option today. So simulate is exactly as it sounds. We're going to take a policy that we've created and simulate it against our running environment before we apply it to see if it has the affected outcome that we want, to make sure we're not making mistakes with our policy or blocking traffic that shouldn't be blocked. And the tune is what I've just shown right at the start as well, which is looking holistically at your whole cluster or just individual namespaces to see if there's a way to lock down those policies further. So let's start by adding a new Cilium network policy into my environment. So I'm going to do kubectl apply, and I'm just going to pipe in my YAML file. And what we're doing here, very simply, is we're selecting my single pod that's running using the label that's available. And we're saying any traffic to the fqdn name of isovalent.com is allowed. So now I've got this policy available. If I try and go to cisco.com again, we're going to get a termination message there. If we go to the example.com, we get a termination as well. Ignore this WebSocket message. That's just my demo environment catching up in the background. But nothing to worry about for today's demo. I'm just going to clear that down just to keep everything a bit more concise on my terminal window. Okay, so I'm now going to go to isovalent.com. I'm going to see that that works because it's allowed by the policy. We have a updated version of that policy saved in a folder as well. So if I just do a quick cat to my proposed folder, and then we've got the Isopolicy CMP example update YAML file, it's the exact same YAML file that we showed before with one change only, which is changing the name to cisco.com. We're going to see here that the Isopolicy CMP example is the same name. So we're not adding a new policy. We're going to update that policy inside of our environment. So what we want to do is we want to simulate what happens in my environment when I now apply that policy. So we're going to run Isopolicy simulate. I'm just going to look at the default namespace where my workloads are deployed. I'm just going to say read all the files in that proposed directory. There is only that single YAML file in that proposed directory today. As we can see, that was really, really quick because it's pulling from the live environment as it stands today. So let's talk through a little bit of this. So you can see we've loaded the simulation, that single file that I showed you. It shows the name of the namespace and the CMP name applied. We can see the deployed network policies that are currently taking effect today. So we can see we've got our traffic being affected by the policy that's in place. We can also see the DNS traffic being affected by the DNS visibility policy. And we can see that our traffic is allowed today and the type of traffic and so forth. If we then go down, we can then see what the simulated network policies are in place. So we are thinking about the default ISO policy. So it's the same name because we're updating that policy. We're looking at that traffic, which is cisco.com. So that's what we're simulating. And we can see already that the policy is going to be allowed. And if I go down to the simulation results, we're going to see the same as well. The simulation results show this in a slightly different format. And the reason why that's important is because here very quickly I can see what's going to happen with my expected traffic. So I can see here with the little plus symbol that the traffic to cisco.com would now be allowed by that policy update. However, my existing flows also show that the traffic that has already happened or has already been transmitted out of my environment, that would be affected as well and potentially denied by my policy. So this little minus symbol here is showing that this flow would no longer be allowed by the policy because we've removed isovalent.com from that to FQDN list, which is going to have a negative effect if I was expecting to still access isovalent.com. So that's fantastic because I can see all this happening without having to apply to my cluster, go through Hubble Observe, and then look at the policy verdicts, for example. So yeah, really, really simple, really great tooling from that point of view to kind of get to grips with. Shall we take a look at that tune command again as well before we wrap up this video? So I'm going to go to Isopolicy, tune. I'm going to do include ns, and I'm just going to look at my default namespace again, because otherwise without this command, it would look at my whole cluster. And I'm going to add a range command to this. I'm going to put 50 minutes in place. And what's happening here is it's going to now automatically discover and connect to Timescape deployed into my cluster to pull the historical flows from Timescape to consider as well as part of this tuning. So now we can see we're ingesting flows. If we go down, we can see at the moment we've just got one policy which is being considered for tuning out of the two that have been applied inside of my environment already. And again, as I mentioned at the very start of this demo, it's the same recommendation. So it's about how to handle locking down the protocols inside of that policy for the other flows that have been observed inside of my environment, and also updating that endpoint selector. So again, it only applies to those workloads inside of my environment. So yeah, we're going to bring this video to a close. Really quick wrap up of showing you the power of the Isopolicy tooling, which allows you to validate, simulate, and optimize the Cilium network policies inside of your environment, either manually, as I've done today, simulating it as kind of a network operator, just kind of checking things in my environment, or again, programmatically, you can build this into your GitOps pipelines going forward. Have a good day.